In the summer of 2021, the United States Supreme Court issued a unanimous 9-0 ruling that effectively dismantled the NCAA's model of amateurism. It was a legal earthquake. But if you look at the opening pages of Justice Neil Gorsuch's majority opinion, he doesn't cite a modern quarterback or a viral TikTok star. He cites a legend from 1904. Justice Gorsuch pointed to a specific man, a Yale tackle who held the exclusive cigarette franchise for the American Tobacco Company, lived in a luxury suite, and took an all-expenses-paid vacation to Havana, Cuba on the athletic department's dime. His name was James Hogan. To the public in the early 1900s, Hogan was the ideal Yale man, a member of the ultra-secretive Skull and Bones, and a 3-time All-American. But behind the Ivy League prestige was a sophisticated commercial machine that makes today's NIL deals look like amateur hour. This is the story of how a poor Irish immigrant became the godfather of NIL a century before the term existed, and how his illegal lifestyle was actually the foundation of the game we love today. To understand why the highest court in the land would find the key to a modern multi-billion-dollar dispute in an athlete from the early 1900s, we have to travel back to 1878, to a world before the rules were written and before the myths had been made. Before he was a legal precedent, James Joseph Hogan was simply a 2-year-old boy on a ship in steerage, leaving the shadow of the Great Famine for a mill town in Connecticut. Glenbeigh is a townland in County Tipperary in the south of Ireland, farming country that in 1878 was still living with the shadow of the Great Famine. The famine had ended 30 years earlier, but it had not been forgotten. It had cut the population of Ireland nearly in half, and what remained was a people who understood that the ground beneath their feet was not guaranteed. Torrington, Connecticut was a mill town on the Naugatuck River, brass mills, woolen mills, a town that understood work as currency. James Hogan spent much of his childhood working to support his family, getting through school when he could, making progress bit by bit. And then, sometime in the mid-1890s, he saved enough money to enroll at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. He was approximately 20 years old. Phillips Exeter was not a school for the children of mill workers. Its students were overwhelmingly the sons of New England's professional class, boys who would go on to Harvard and Yale as a matter of family expectation. James Hogan walked in anyway. Older than nearly everyone around him, with an Irish accent, he let nothing slow him down. He captained the Exeter football team in 1899 and 1900, broad-shouldered, 5'10", 210 pounds. On a field full of teenagers from wealthy families, the grown man from Torrington was the best player on it. By the time Hogan finished at Exeter, he had proved he could dominate the sons of the New England elite. But when he arrived in New Haven in 1901, he found that football had become something much larger than a game of sport. It had become a factory of national prestige, and the man running the assembly line was Walter Camp. Between 1872 and 1909, Yale won 26 national championships. They amassed 324 wins against only 17 losses. The field at New Haven held 35,000 people, and it was not always enough. The game had become an industry. Walter Camp had played halfback at Yale in the 1870s and never really left. He worked a day job at the New Haven Clock Company, but his real occupation was Yale football. He had essentially invented the modern game: the line of scrimmage, the snap from center, the system of downs, the 11-man team. John Heisman famously remarked that what Washington was to his country, Camp was to American football. He was also one of the most widely read sports writers in America, with nearly 30 books and more than 250 magazine articles to his name. He selected the All-America team every year, and his selections were treated as official. He held no formal coaching title, drew no salary from the athletic department, but everyone understood that Walter Camp ran Yale football. He recruited the players, shaped the strategy, and used an alumni-funded slush fund of $100,000 to make sure the right men showed up in New Haven and stayed there. James Hogan was the perfect product for Camp's factory. He was a powerhouse on the field and a social star who eventually secured a tap from Skull and Bones, the most exclusive secret society in America. But while Walter Camp was busy codifying the rules of the field to make the game more efficient, a different kind of titan was applying those same industrial principles to the American vice market. James Buchanan Buck Duke didn't just want to sell tobacco. He wanted to monopolize the American lifestyle. And as he looked for a way to conquer the Ivy League, his eyes fell on the very hero Walter Camp had spent years building. Buck Duke grew up in a world of absolute scarcity, and it left him with a lifelong hunger for absolute control. By 30, he had relocated the family business to New York, leased the first commercially viable cigarette rolling machine in America, and launched an advertising campaign with no precedent in American consumer marketing. He spent $800,000 on advertising in 1889 while accepting less than $400,000 in profit. He was buying market share in a product just beginning its conquest of American life. In 1890, Duke merged his four largest competitors and created the American Tobacco Company. It controlled 90% of American cigarette production. By 1900, American Tobacco had absorbed more than 250 companies. That year, Duke acquired the Ncaa Company of New York, a name I probably butchered as bad as I possibly could, but a firm that produced some of the most fashionable brands of cigarettes in the country, like Egyptian Deities and Mogul. They were sold in elegant packaging to consumers who wanted to signal refinement. The marketing slogan was direct. People of culture, refinement, and education invariably preferred Deities to any other cigarette. What Duke needed was an insider. He needed someone the students already trusted and admired, someone whose endorsement wouldn't feel like an advertisement. At Yale, the right mechanism had a 3-time All-American reputation and a locker in the most exclusive secret society in America. The arrangement that followed was a merger of interests. It was the moment where the purity of the campus met the predatory efficiency of the monopoly. And despite what we're told today about the sacred nature of amateurism, this merger wasn't hidden in the shadows. It was the talk of the town. The most striking thing about the arrangement was that nobody felt the need to whisper about it. The details were public knowledge, discussed in the campus papers, and confirmed to the press by tobacco executives who seemed proud of their investment. Hogan held the exclusive cigarette franchise for the American Tobacco Company at Yale. It was a straightforward commission structure. He took a cut of every box sold in New Haven. When a student walked into Maury's to buy a pack, they didn't ask for the brand name. They asked for Hogan cigarettes. The cigarette franchise was only part of it. Hogan held the scorecard concession at Yale baseball games. He paid no tuition. He lived in one of the finest dormitory suites on campus. And in the spring, he traveled to Havana, Cuba with Yale trainer Mike Murphy. It was an all-expenses-paid vacation that Walter Camp recorded in Yale's athletic financial records under miscellaneous expenses. Camp was publicly on record about money in athletics, writing that a gentleman never competes for money directly or indirectly. He wrote this while managing a $100,000 slush fund for the very player benefits he was calling ungentlemanly. The gap between what Camp said and what Camp did was simply how things were organized. The language of amateurism running alongside the machinery of commercial operation. Hogan wasn't trying to cheat a system because in 1904 the system didn't really exist. There were no NCAA bylaws and no legal definition of amateurism. On fall Saturdays in New Haven, with 35,000 people in the stands, James Joseph Hogan lined up a tackle and hit into the line like a hammer, and the world made complete sense. In 1904, his teammates elected him captain. It was the last season he would play. For 4 seasons, the world of James Hogan made perfect sense, but the world he navigated so perfectly was about to outlive him. Hogan left Yale in 1905, coached at Exeter, and then enrolled at the Columbia Law School. He wrote for the Columbia Law Review and passed the bar. In 1909, he was appointed Deputy Street Cleaning Commissioner for the city of New York, but his rise was cut short. In March 1910, James Joseph Hogan died of Bright's disease. He was buried in Torrington, back where his journey had begun. He was 33 years old. When the College Football Hall of Fame inducted him in 1954, the citation noted his record and his captaincy. But the cigarettes were gone. By then, the NCAA had fully committed to the amateur ideal that Walter Camp had only flirted with. To protect a multi-billion-dollar industry, the institution needed a clean history. Hogan was presented as a paragon of a pure era. The reality of his commercial life was scrubbed from the narrative. Hogan became a sanitized footnote. He stayed in that footnote for 67 years until the world he lived in finally collided with our own. In the 2021 case of NCAA versus Alston, the Supreme Court had to decide if amateurism was a genuine and long-standing tradition. When Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion for the unanimous 9-0 ruling against the NCAA, he reached back to the very beginning. He resurrected the story of the Yale tackle who'd sold cigarettes at Maury's and traveled to Cuba on the department's tab. James Hogan had been dead for 111 years. He'd never heard the word amateurism applied to himself, yet there he was in the Supreme Court of the United States, in the opening argument of a unanimous opinion that dismantled what the NCAA had spent decades constructing. The story of James Hogan forces us to look at the current chaos of college football, the transfer portal, and the massive NIL deals in a different light. We often hear that the game is broken or that it's lost its way, but looking back at Hogan's era, I want to hear from you. Was the game ever truly amateur, or was that just a story people like Walter Camp told us to make us feel like the business was more of a brotherhood? Does Hogan's story make you feel better about the modern game? Or does it just prove that the money was there from the start? Let's discuss it in the comments. This is John Johnston with Hardcore College Football History. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other history videos, and you might enjoy going to our website where you can click on the timeline feature and see series about the history of early American football or the history of offense. You can learn about the veer, the first triple option offense, or the history of the I formation.